Have you ever had those moments as a parent where you say, hey, we should watch a movie from when I was a kid, and you start to watch it and you realize, man, the messages in this movie just aren't right. They're not what I want to teach my kids. And you think back to your childhood and think, man, this is such a fantastic movie for me. It's part of my childhood, but I just can't imagine that it's something that I would want my kids to watch now as I'm sitting here watching the show with my kids. Sometimes navigating those moments with our kids as we kind of work to introduce them to storylines or parts of our childhood that we thought were so formative or so helpful. And then we get into it and we realize, man, this is actually kind of dark. It's not what I want to teach my kids. Sometimes those moments can be really dark places for parents. But today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in our daily segment, Facing the Dark, Dr. Kathy's going to look at specifically kind of Disney princesses, but we're going to look at it from a larger context. What do we do and how do we teach our kids to have maybe heroes or storyline heroes that can inspire in them some good characteristics that we want to teach, but maybe their storylines aren't all that good? How do we navigate that? Dr. Kathy has some insight, so let's turn to her now on the Celebrate Kids podcast.
Don't be afraid of the dark, be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, there's a new study that's saying that Disney princesses aren't as bad for kids as maybe some of us parents might fear. The study focused really on child's kind of body esteem, meaning kind of how confident they feel in their own bodies and their masculine or their feminine play. These two criteria, body esteem and gendered play, are some of the most cited concerns with many who fear kind of introducing their kids to Disney princesses. Now, the study went on to include about 340 kids and their caregivers in the Denver area from around 2020 to 2021. It's a little bit over half of the children that studied were girls. About 84% were white. And the team surveyed caregivers first when their children were 3 years old, and then again a year later, to kind of measure how they felt about themselves, kind of their body image. An important finding from this study was how having a favorite princess who was thin didn't change the child's body image or even their gendered play. Instead, researchers described the benefits from having kind of a favorite princess who has an average body as kind of a protective effect for young children who love that princess. Now, Dr. Kathy, this is a little bit funny to bring up, but it's a real thing in actually kind of my life and the life of my friends around us. We're wrestling through this. And I think it's interesting to consider, because kids, they develop heroes. And for young girls, I feel like Disney has done kind of a nice job of opening up kind of the gamut of different types of, maybe I don't know if you want to call it kind of like personas inside of being a young woman, where you could be, really concerned about kind of beauty and looking nice or whatever. You could be really aggressive or really liking to kind of do different things. And the storylines aren't, always accurate to kind of the original story. I don't know if anyone's read The Little Mermaid and kind of the original intent of it, but not really the storyline that you're going to find in the Disney movie. The storylines aren't even always supportive of parents, but I do think that there are some aspects of what kind of is presented in Disney princesses that can kind of build confidence or bravery in young women. But, I might be just kind of an ignorant dad here. Are Disney princesses problematic? What are your thoughts there with that?
I haven't thought about this in a long time. I think with anything, there can be good and bad. I'm not sure there's very much that I would say is 100% always good, 100% always evil. I think that there are many Disney princesses who are brave, confident, good people skills. They're leaders. Many of these Disney princesses are leaders. Many have, power in their position that they use for good and for even redemption. So I think there is some good to be done here. And I think the study is good. The 340 young people, that's a good number to study. And I think this is really interesting data. I would want parents to use more than just Disney princesses. So I think that's one of the practical things I want to say is that don't raise your kids only with Disney princesses or only with cowboys. Make sure that there's a variety of influences that you have. But many of the movies, they're creative, they're dance, they're musical. They introduce young girls to, really beauty, which I think is also really good. And then I think when we see something that goes against the biblical narrative, if we're Christians, then we do point that out. And we do help them understand that Disney character or Disney princess did not act in maybe a God-honoring way. Maybe that's something we point out. But, we don't always have to talk to them about that. It's okay, in my opinion, to let them enjoy a princess. Even if there's a little bit wrong, they can enjoy the princess and you can celebrate what's good there.
Yeah. And Dr. Kathy, the interesting thing about this study is that it really focused kind of on confidence and kind of confidence in gender, which I thought was really interesting. And then also confidence in body type. What do you think of those kind of things for parents? I mean, are there gauges that are maybe important for us? I wouldn't say maybe necessarily more important, but what other gauges should parents consider when we're looking at these different things and how they're impacting our kids? I mean, maybe our kids watch a movie or they participate or kind of read a book or something and they develop a different negative habit. What are the things that we should be kind of monitoring for kids as they're growing up in these different stages?
So interesting. I would hope that parents have values, and I would hope that parents have expectations for who they are and who they are going to be, and that they've called their family to be generous. They've called the family to be loving and kind and more concerned with others than with themselves. So I hope parents have decided that in our family, these are the things that matter the most. And that way we can recognize when we and our kids are being led astray by a neighbor or by a movie or by a book that we're reading aloud or a book that a kid is reading in a school setting, and we can see that it is negative toward a different race, and we're not going to allow that to be a part of our home, or it's negative toward a gender. Like, I love that this study is about gender security. We have got to raise our children to be secure in their gender, absolutely, to see it as good and God glorifying, and that God made no mistake to make me a woman and you a man. He knows what he's doing. Confidence and body type, extremely important. And to show that people with more weight can dance. Not all dancers are slender. Now, if you're going to be a professional ballerina in New York City making a living, you're going to weigh nothing, but you can be a 10-year-old girl in a dance class in your hometown and have a great time and be applauded and all of that. And I think that's what I would want to make sure that parents are doing, that they're not gauging their children's abilities based on professionals, but they're gauging their children's abilities on their age and what would be appropriate and what would be fun and life-giving for them.
Yeah. And, Dr. Kathy, I think when we look at this, we kind of see, especially Disney princesses, the way that they're presented are kind of in kind of a heroic format, right? For young girls to kind of see and identify different things. And I'll be honest, when I watch a football movie or some kind of movie, I kind of take it on. I want to act it out. I want to go out and throw the football over the mountain or something, right? Like, I'm a character in a movie after I watch it. What's important for us to realize, though, as parents, when our kids kind of start acting out their play from the stories that they hear, see, or read? Is that something that we should, kind of encourage in them to think through the different characteristics? And are those things that we should take on, or should we allow kind of that creative play? What do you think about that in terms of how it drives and encourages child development, brain development, social development, all of those things?
Oh, I love this conversation because it's super important. Imaginative play is on the outs. It's interesting. If you talk to teachers of young children, they'll tell us that kids don't know how to pretend to play house anymore. Kids don't know how to pretend to be a dad who goes off to work and comes home and, kisses his wife and picks up his baby. Now that's not 100% true, but it's more true than it's ever been. And it really alarms me. Kids learn a lot by imaginative play. And if they have watched a movie or read a book and it's come alive in their mind and they want to act that out, that is so healthy if the movie was right for them to see, which is why you have to not let them see what they should not see. Because if you allow them to watch something that is not God honoring or is not a fair version of gender or race or whatever, and they act that out, now you've got a problem. And then you have to sit down with them and say, we're going to ask you to stop replaying that movie in your mind, and here's why. You're not a bad kid. But we've discovered that you're adding elements to the plot that are not appropriate. We don't want you to be thinking that those things are true. And could I say something, Wayne? One of the things that really concerns me about the movie Frozen, and I'm going to go out on a limb here because we're going to have people turn off the podcast. I mean, Frozen was a great movie in a lot of ways. Great animation, great music. I love the bond of the sisters, which we don't see that a lot. But I want to remind everyone that the girl had a skill and the parents locked her in a room. If I had any young girl who replayed that, there's no way I would allow for that. That movie was horrible in two or three ways. One was the parents died 15 minutes into the movie and those girls raised themselves. That's a Hollywood lie that the family is unnecessary. Second huge problem is that girl with the skill was locked in a room. Whereas the parent's role is to help children use skill for positive effect. And so if your children have watched something that is, celebrating something that is wrong, and your children continue to act that out, you've got to jump on that, because that's being internalized in a very, very deep way, and you can't allow for that to happen.
For some reason, what Dr. Kathy kind of talks about here reminded me of this passage out of Genesis chapter 6, beginning at verse 5. And this is what Moses records. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart were only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart had been deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race that I have created, and with them all the animals and the birds and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. I love this passage because it kind of elicits this idea that there was a storyline in all of creation that was kind of going against the design that the Lord had made, to the point of where it seems like God had wished that he had never written the human race into his story. But then the story changes, where Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And I think that that's an important reality for us as we hear these different narratives coming from our culture. May we be those people who raise up kids to find favor in the eyes of the Lord in the face of the narratives and the ideas and the cultural context that wants to say that there is no need for God in the world. I think doing that is a bright light that shines and cuts through the darkest times. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast in this daily segment, Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender, and I want to say thanks for listening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.